Imagine this. You are sitting in a cafe in London. Across from you is a colleague, a friendly person, someone you have met before. They lean forward and ask you a simple question. So, what do you think about it? You understand every word. You have an answer forming in your mind. You know exactly what you want to say, but when you open your mouth, something strange happens. The words slow down. The sentence breaks apart. You say 2 or 3 words, then you stop, and you look at them and say, I think, yes it is, good. And they nod politely. And you feel it. That quiet, uncomfortable feeling of knowing so much and saying so little. That moment. That exact, painful moment. That is what this video is about. Welcome to English Learning Studio, the place where language meets life, where every story we tell, every idea we explore, every lesson we share is designed to grow your English in a way that is deep, real, and lasting. Before we go further, I want to tell you something important. This video is not just content for you to watch. It is a listening experience, a vocabulary journey, and a speaking teacher all at once. As you follow this story today, pay attention to how sentences are built, how ideas connect to each other, how emotions live inside language. The English you absorb here, through real explanation, real rhythm, real meaning. This is the kind of English that stays with you, not because you memorized it, but because you felt it. So settle in. This is going to be one of the most honest, most useful conversations about English speaking that you have ever had. There is a name for that moment in the cafe. Researchers who study language call it the output gap. It is the space, sometimes small, sometimes enormous, between how much of a language a person can understand and how much they can actually produce when it counts. And here is the fascinating, slightly uncomfortable truth about this gap. It is not caused by what most people think. Most learners believe the gap exists because they have not learned enough. They think, if I just study more vocabulary, more grammar, more phrases, one day the gap will close and I will suddenly be able to speak. But that is not how it works. And understanding why it does not work that way is the first real breakthrough in becoming a fluent speaker. Let me explain this with a story. In 1967, a linguist named Stephen Krashen was studying at a university in California. He was fascinated by one particular question that nobody at the time could fully answer. The question was this: why do children become fluent in their first language almost effortlessly, while adults studying a second language, even with years of textbooks and classes, often struggle their entire lives to have a simple conversation? He spent years watching, testing, comparing. He looked at children raised in multilingual homes. He studied immigrants who became fluent quickly versus those who never did. He interviewed language teachers and their students. And eventually, he arrived at an idea so clear, so powerful, that it changed the way the world understood language learning forever. He said, there is a fundamental difference between two things that we often mix together. There is learning a language, and there is acquiring a language. Learning is conscious. It is studying rules. It is memorizing lists. It is sitting in a classroom and being corrected. It produces knowledge that lives in one part of your brain, the analytical, logical part, the part that takes time to access, the part that freezes when you are nervous or tired or being watched. Acquiring is different. Acquisition is what happens when you absorb language through real use, through meaning, through context and emotion and need. It lives in a different, deeper part of your brain. It is fast. It is automatic. It is what allows a child to say, I went, before they have ever heard the word conjugation. They never learned the rule. They simply heard it so many times in meaningful situations that it became part of them. The insight that Krashen offered was this: only acquired language becomes truly fluent speech. Learned language, grammar rules, vocabulary lists, studied phrases can support you, but it cannot flow freely under pressure because it was never embedded the right way. And when you sit in that cafe trying to answer a simple question, it is not your knowledge that fails you. It is the gap between what you have learned and what you have truly acquired. Now, you might be thinking, fine, that is interesting, but what does it actually mean for me? How does a theory from the 1960s help me speak English today? It means everything. And here is why. When most learners try to improve their speaking, they do more of the same thing. They watch more videos, they study more grammar, they read more articles, they add more to the learned side of their brain, and they wonder why the speaking side stays empty. What they are not doing, what you may not have been doing, is creating the conditions for acquisition. And acquisition has a very specific set of requirements. It is not random. It is not mysterious. It can be deliberately built. There are 3 conditions that make language acquisition happen. I call them the 3 pillars. And once you understand them, you will see your English practice in a completely new way. The first pillar is meaningful input. This means language that you are exposed to slightly above your current level. Not too easy, not impossibly hard, and connected to something you care about, something that has emotional or intellectual meaning for you. When language comes with meaning attached, your brain begins to acquire it, not just file it away. The second pillar is emotional activation. When you are emotionally engaged, curious, surprised, moved, interested, your brain releases chemicals that strengthen memory and language pathways. This is why you can remember the first movie you watched in English far better than the 10th grammar worksheet you completed. The movie made you feel something. The worksheet did not. The third pillar is output practice that builds automaticity. This is the one that most people skip. Not just any speaking practice, but a specific type of practice designed to move language from your slow, conscious mind to your fast, automatic response system. Let me walk through each of these pillars deeply, because each one contains a practical method that you can use starting today. Pillar 1. Meaningful input. Here is an important word for you today: comprehensible. It means able to be understood. When input, reading, listening, watching, is comprehensible and slightly challenging, it enters your language system differently than content that is either too easy or totally confusing. Think of it like a stretch. If a stretch is too gentle, your muscles do not grow. If it is too extreme, you injure yourself. The perfect stretch, just beyond your comfortable range, is what builds real flexibility. The same is true for language input. So when you choose what to watch, what to listen to, what to read in English, choose things where you understand the majority, but encounter some new vocabulary, some new constructions, some new rhythms. Not Netflix shows where you miss half of what is said. Not children's books where you already know every word, the space in between. But meaningful input is not just about difficulty level. The word meaningful is doing important work here. Input that is connected to a topic you genuinely care about activates a completely different quality of attention. Your brain is not passively receiving. It is actively searching for meaning. And in that searching, language acquisition happens naturally, almost invisibly. This is why some learners become surprisingly fluent after following English language content about their passion. Cooking, technology, history, psychology, even without formal study. They were not studying. They were living inside the language, looking for meaning, and the language was quietly making itself at home inside them. Your action for this pillar: identify 3 topics that genuinely interest you. Not 3 topics you think will help your English, but 3 things you would happily spend an hour reading or watching about, even in your own language. Find English language content about those topics. Make it part of your week. Let interest do what textbooks cannot. Pillar 2, emotional activation. Let me tell you about something that happened in a language classroom in Japan in the 1990s. A teacher named James Asher had developed a method called total physical response, where students learned language by physically acting out commands, moving their bodies, responding with emotion and action, rather than silent note-taking. His students acquired functional vocabulary at a dramatically faster rate than students in traditional classes, not because the content was different, because the experience of learning it was different. Their bodies were involved. Their emotions were engaged. They were not observers of language. They were participants in it. This tells us something profound. When you engage with English only as an intellectual exercise, processing it calmly, analytically, from a safe distance, you are actually slowing down acquisition. You are keeping language at arm's length, and language cannot become yours from arm's length. Emotion is the bridge. It is not a nice addition to language learning. It is a core mechanism. So how do you build emotional activation into your English practice? One of the most effective ways is through what I call meaningful shadow practice. This is different from simply repeating sentences. In meaningful shadow practice, you choose spoken content that moves you in some way: a speech, a scene from a story, a real conversation about something that matters, and you do not just repeat the words. You try to feel what the speaker feels as they say them. You are not imitating sound. You are stepping inside the emotion behind the sound. Your voice changes. Your pace changes. The language begins to belong to you in a way that flat, emotionless repetition never produces. Let me give you an example right now. Imagine someone saying these words: "I didn't think I could do it. I had failed so many times, but I kept going, and somehow, against everything I expected, it worked." Now, read those words again. But this time, imagine it is you speaking. Imagine you are talking about something difficult in your own life, a challenge you faced, a moment of doubt, a small or large victory. Say the words out loud. Let them connect to something real. Did you feel the difference? That is emotional activation. That is the second pillar at work. Your action for this pillar: once a day, take a short paragraph of English, from a podcast, a speech, a book, and do not read it silently. Speak it aloud with full emotional engagement. Make it yours, even if it feels strange at first, especially if it feels strange. The strangeness means something is shifting. Before we go further, I want to pause here and acknowledge something. If you have been learning English for a long time and still feel stuck, if you have watched hundreds of videos and attended classes and studied hard and still freeze when you need to speak, I want to say this clearly: there is nothing wrong with you. The frustration you feel is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you have been working hard with the wrong tools. You have been building knowledge when what you needed to build was something different, something more like instinct, more like reflex, more like muscle. And building that is absolutely possible. It just looks different from what you have been doing. This is the middle of our journey today, and it is also the moment where the lesson gets most practical and most personal. Pillar 3. Automaticity through deliberate output. Here is a word that is central to everything in this pillar: automaticity. It means the ability to do something without conscious thought. When you tie your shoes, You do not think about each step. Your hands just know. When you read in your native language, you do not translate letters into sounds, and sounds into words, and words into meaning. It just happens. Fluent speech requires automaticity, not perfection, automaticity. The ability to produce language without consciously assembling it piece by piece. And automaticity in speaking is built through a very specific type of practice, not passive listening, not reading. Speaking, but speaking in a particular structured way that pushes language out of your slow, deliberate processing system and into your fast, automatic one. I call this practice layered production, and it works in 3 stages. Stage 1 is called anchored output. You take a short sentence or phrase, 6 to 10 words, that you want to own completely. Something from real life, from something you have read or heard. For example, I wasn't sure what to do at first, or it turned out to be much better than I expected, or I think there's something important we need to consider. You say this sentence with full attention to meaning, not fast, not robot slow, just natural, connected to what it means, 5 times, each time slightly more naturally than the last. This is not about memorizing the sentence. It is about letting your mouth, your breath, and your mind all become comfortable with this particular arrangement of sounds and meaning together. Stage 2 is called flexible output. Now you take that same sentence and you change one element of it. You keep the rhythm and pattern, but shift the content. I wasn't sure what to say at first. I wasn't sure how to feel at first. She wasn't sure what to think at first. Each variation anchors the pattern more deeply. Your brain begins to see the structure as a template, not a fixed phrase to memorize. This is the difference between a learner who says 20 memorized sentences and a speaker who can generate thousands of original ones. Stage 3 is called pressure output. This is where automaticity is truly built. You set a timer, 30 seconds. You think of any real topic in your life, anything at all, and you speak about it in English without stopping for the full 30 seconds. You will make mistakes. That is not the point. The point is that you are forcing your brain and your speaking system to work together under time pressure, pulling whatever language you have acquired and using it right now, with no chance to think too carefully. At first, 30 seconds will feel like climbing a mountain. After 2 weeks of daily practice, it will feel like a short walk. After a month, you will be asking yourself why you ever found it difficult. This is how automaticity is built, not by knowing more, but by producing more, under real conditions, until the effort disappears. Now I want to bring these 3 pillars together into something you can actually use as a weekly structure. Because the other thing that separates people who transform their English from people who stay stuck is not talent or intelligence. It is consistency. And consistency is only sustainable when the practice is simple enough to actually do. Here is what a week of acquisition-based English practice can look like. On the first day, you focus on meaningful input. You spend 20 to 30 minutes engaged with English content on a topic you love. You are not studying. You are consuming with full attention, letting meaning pull you forward. On the second day, you do emotional shadow practice for 10 minutes. You choose 2 or 3 short passages of spoken English that move you in some way, and you speak them aloud with full feeling. You let the emotion drive the language. On the third day, you do layered production. You pick 3 new sentences from something you listened to or read. You anchor them, make them flexible, and then do 2 rounds of pressure output, 30 seconds each. On the 4th day, you rest your formal practice. But you choose 1 English sentence during the day, just 1, and you say it out loud to yourself at some point. In the kitchen. on a walk, in the car. One sentence spoken with full meaning. On the fifth day, you return to meaningful input, but this time you choose something slightly more challenging than last time. You are stretching. On the sixth day, you combine shadow practice with layered production. You take a sentence from your shadow practice and move it through all three stages of the production system. On the seventh day, you do the 30-second pressure output with a new topic, something personal, something that matters to you. You speak for 30 seconds. Then you speak for another 30 seconds. Then you rest. That is it. That is an entire week of English acquisition practice. It is not 8 hours. It is not 5 hours. It is genuine, focused, emotionally engaged practice that builds the thing you actually need. The automatic, natural, deeply embedded English that shows up when you need it most. Let me tell you about a woman named Maria. Maria grew up in a small city in Brazil. She studied English from the age of 9, grammar classes, vocabulary workbooks, reading comprehension exercises. By her mid-20s, she had been studying English off and on for 15 years. She could pass written tests. She could read academic articles. She understood most of what she heard in English films, but she could not have a conversation. Every time she tried, the familiar freeze came. The gap between what she knew and what she could say felt unbridgeable. A colleague suggested she try something different. Instead of studying English, spend time living inside it. Maria loved architecture. She had always loved it. She started following architects who gave talks in English, reading about buildings and cities in English, watching documentaries about urban design in English, not as study, as pleasure. 3 months later, a client from Germany visited her office. He spoke to her in English. And something extraordinary happened, she answered. Not perfectly, not fluently in the way a native speaker is fluent, but naturally, without freezing, without that familiar collapse of confidence. She said afterward, I did not practice for that conversation, but everything I had absorbed, the ideas, the language around those ideas, the enthusiasm I felt, it all came out. It was not me remembering phrases. It was me speaking. That is acquisition. That is what it looks like when it works. Maria's story is not exceptional. It is what happens when the conditions are right, and the conditions can always be made right. There is one more concept I want to share with you before we close, because it addresses something that almost every English learner faces, and very few people talk about honestly. It is the role of what linguists call affective filter, your emotional state when you are using a second language. When you are relaxed, curious, unself-conscious, the filter is low. Language flows in and out more freely. Acquisition happens faster. Output comes more naturally. When you are anxious, embarrassed, afraid of judgment, the filter goes up. Language gets blocked. The words you know do not arrive in time. The sentences you have practiced vanish when you need them. This is not a character flaw. It is brain chemistry. It is your nervous system doing what it is designed to do, protecting you from situations it has learned to perceive as threatening. And speaking a language imperfectly in front of others is something that most of our nervous systems have been trained to see as threatening. The fear of sounding foolish, the memory of being corrected in class, the silence after a misunderstanding. These experiences teach your brain speaking English is dangerous, and your brain, very helpfully, tries to protect you from the danger by shutting down your output system right when you need it most. The solution is not to tell yourself not to be afraid. The solution is to gradually, consistently, gently prove to your nervous system that English speaking is safe. This is why the practices I described earlier matter so much. When you speak English alone, in front of a mirror, during a walk, in 30-second pressure outputs, you are giving your nervous system hundreds of small experiences of speaking without consequence. No judgment, no embarrassment, just the act of producing language in a low-stakes environment. Over time, your brain updates its assessment. English speaking is no longer coded as dangerous. It is coded as normal. And when something is normal, the filter stays low and language flows. This is why the most important place to practice speaking English is not in a conversation class or with a native speaker or in a formal setting. It is in private, daily, low-pressure moments where you are simply reminding your brain that your voice and this language belong together. We are near the end of this journey today, but I do not want to close without giving you one final honest thought. Every language you have ever spoken, every word that has ever come out of your mouth naturally and effortlessly, was once strange to you. There was a time when even your native language felt uncertain. There was a time when you searched for words that later became second nature. There was a time when you made errors that you cannot even remember making now, because your brain processed them and corrected them without drama, without shame, without giving up. You learned your first language the same way a river learns its path, not by being shown the route, but by moving, flowing, encountering obstacles, finding the way around, and moving again. Your second language, English, deserves the same kind of patience, the same kind of forward movement, the same trust in the process. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not a failed English learner. You are someone who has been using the wrong kind of effort, and now you know what right effort looks like. Meaningful input. Emotional activation. Deliberate output that builds automaticity. A nervous system that learns slowly and surely that your voice is safe in this language. That is the path. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily, genuinely, and with the particular satisfaction of building something real. The cafe moment at the beginning of this video. The freeze, the broken sentence, the quiet, uncomfortable feeling. That moment does not have to define your relationship with English. It can be the last chapter of the old story, not the whole story. The next chapter begins with one sentence spoken aloud today. In your room. On your way somewhere. Just one sentence, with full meaning, with real feeling, with your own voice. That is where fluency begins. Not in knowledge, in voice. Thank you for spending this time with English Learning Studio. What you did today was more than watch a video. You listened to complex ideas expressed in real English. You followed an argument that moved across multiple concepts and examples and moments. You absorbed vocabulary not from a list, but from context. Words like automaticity, affective filter, comprehensible, acquisition, words that now live inside an experience rather than inside a definition box. That is how language grows. That is how this channel works. Every story we tell, every idea we explore, every insight we share, it is all in English, and all of it is for you. If this video helped you see your English journey differently, subscribe to English Learning Studio. Because every day we bring you powerful stories, profound ideas, and real-world knowledge, all in clear, beautiful English, designed not just to inform you, but to grow you. You are not here just to learn a language. You are here to expand your world. And English, spoken with understanding, with feeling, with the freedom that comes from true acquisition, is one of the most powerful ways to do that. Your voice is ready. Trust it, use it, and keep going.